Welcome back to Mission Control Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room. We are back a little earlier than planned because the crew has gotten ahead in their timeline and are actually in the process of moving the Conatory 2 HTV-3 vehicle into position for its installation today at the International Space Station. The Conatory 2 arrived at the space station at 7:23 a.m. Central Time when flight engineer Joe Acaba used the space station's 58-foot-long robotic arm, Canadarm2, to grab it, and that sets the stage for today's actual installation of the vehicle to the Earth-facing port of the Harmony node at the International Space Station. That'll complete the Conatory 3's journey to the space station, which began last week on July 20th when it launched from Tanegashima Space Center in southern Japan. Again, the crew is moving along well ahead of their planned schedule, so although that installation was scheduled to take place later in the morning, they are already getting the vehicle into its pre-installation position, where they'll be then moving it into installation on the Earth-facing port of the Harmony node. You can see the Conatory 3, and Conatory is the Japanese word for white stork, name of the HTV-3. You can see it here held in place by the space station's robotic arm just above what will soon become its home on that Earth-facing port of Harmony. Here on the ground, the team is now led by Flight Director Ed Van Cise, and he is getting help from Capcom Kjell Lindgren today. They took over from David Korth and Capcom Katie Coleman after the capture of the HTV-3 and are now following along with the crew on orbit as they prepare for the installation. On orbit, of course, we have Commander Gennady Padalka and flight engineers Sergei Revin, Joe Acaba, Sonny Williams, Yuri Malenchenko, and Aki Hoshide. Flight engineer Joe Acaba was at the controls of the space station's robotic arm for today's capture of the HTV-3, and he was backed up by Aki Hoshide. Now the two have swapped places, and Hoshide will be bringing the vehicle in for its actual installation, and Acaba will be assisting. And of course, flight engineer Sonny Williams is helping them keep an eye on the various camera views and monitors that they're using to help with the operations today. There will be a couple of major steps for the installation once they are ready to move it into the common berthing mechanism on that Earth-facing Harmony port. There will be two stages of actual installation. The first will be the initial driving of the bolts, but before the installation is actually finished in the second stage, the space station's robotic arm will basically go limp and ensure that there's no pressure on the vehicle that would make that latching give that latching any problems as it drives for the second stage. Before the team here on the ground began moving the vehicle into this pre-installation position, they used the cameras on board the space station to perform an inspection of the common berthing mechanism that's on the HTV side of the equation, and that went very well and also very quickly, which is why the crew is so far ahead of their timeline today. General plan once the vehicle is installed is for the crew to begin getting it ready to open hatches between HTV-3 and the space station today, but not actually go into the HTV-3 until around 6:20 a.m. Central Time tomorrow, Saturday. However, as they are already ahead of schedule, it's not out of the question that they could actually ingress the vehicle today instead. Once they are able to go inside, they'll of course begin unloading its 3.5 tons of cargo that it brought to the International Space Station. Among the cargo that it's delivering, there is a remote-controlled Earth-observing camera called iServe, which is going to be used to gather imagery of the Earth for disaster analysis and environmental studies. There's also a Japanese exploration module small satellite orbital deployer, which is going to be jettisoning 5 nanosatellites into orbit. That's going to allow us to see whether small satellites can be released into orbit without spacewalk, so that'll be an interesting experiment. The 5 satellites that it'll be releasing are CubeSats, which are miniaturized satellites that are small enough to be held in one hand, about 4 inches cubed. There's also an aquatic habitat experiment that can be used to accommodate small fish for up to 90 days. It allows us to perform aquatic organism experiments on board the space station. You can observe the breeding environment, feeding, perform observation of water tanks, and monitor data on the fish that could be observed there. And besides those experiments, there's also a catalytic reactor for the space station's water recycling system and a cooling water recirculation pump for the Japanese systems. That's all in the pressurized section of the HTV-3. One of the things that sets the HTV apart from other cargo vehicles is that it can bring not only pressurized cargo to the space station, but also unpressurized or external cargo, bringing up a couple of systems on its external pallet, including a Japanese multi-mission consolidated equipment set and also NASA's communications, navigation, and networking reconfigurable testbed. Those will be unloaded from the HTV-3 using the station's robotic arms, both the space station's large Canadarm2, which is being used to actually capture the HTV-3 today, as well as the Japanese robotic system. The external cargo will begin being unloaded on August 6th.
Station Houston, space to ground 1 for HTV install.
Go ahead, Joe, we're with you.
Okay, we're done with our pre-install steps, and we are ready for you to pick up in procedure 1.130 HTV install, step 3.
Hey, copy that. In work.
Heard there a moment ago, Flight Engineer Sonny Williams confirming with Day's Capcom Joe Lindgren that the team here on the ground has completed their part in moving the HTV-3 into position, what's called the pre-install position, getting it ready for its actual upcoming installation.
For step 3, we see thrusters disabled.
And we concur.
Now the crew is moving through their next steps in preparation for the installation. They, in addition to disabling the space station's thrusters, make sure that there's no unwanted motion. As you just heard Sonny Williams confirm there. Also, now we'll be getting some of the final setup done for the installation and then maneuvering the HTV into what's called the ready to latch position.
And Station Houston on 1 for HTV install.
Go ahead, Joe, we're with you.
Hey, we're going to go back on our last call. We're still waiting on getting the thrusters disabled, so stand by.
Okay, copy that.
And Station Houston, space to ground 1 for HTV install.
Go ahead.
Okay, so step 3 is now complete, and you are going to pick up in step 4.
Okay, step 4, and sorry if I caused a little confusion with my call earlier. That was just confirming the things I was checking was complete.
Nope, no worries at all. We were just waiting for the hardware to catch up with our commands.
Houston Station on 1, just a quick question for overlays.
We're with you on 1.
Yeah, I just want to double check. We are Berthing camera system and then CBCS visiting vehicle. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. Just wanted to double check.
This is Mission Control Houston on board the International Space Station. The crew is continuing to get ready for the installation of the Kunitori 3 or HTV-3 Japanese cargo vehicle that launched from Tanegashima Space Center in southern Japan on July 20th and spent the past week making its way to the International Space Station. It was captured by the space station's Canadarm2, its 58-foot long robotic arm, at 7:23 a.m. Central Time this morning. And after being just a bit behind schedule for the capture, the crew is now well ahead of schedule for the installation. So they are just a couple of steps away from actually moving the HTV-3 into what's called the ready to latch position, which is where they are ready to actually latch the bolts that will begin the installation of the HTV-3 on the Earth-facing port of the Harmony node. HTV will be at the space station until September.
Ready to press in for RTLs.
Flight Engineer Sunny Williams there, confirming that they were ready to press in, as she said, to the RTLs, which are those ready to latch positions that I mentioned. As I was saying, the HTV will be at the space station until September as the crew unloads the 3.5 tons of cargo that it brought to the space station and then fills the vehicle back up with trash and used supplies to send away from the space station. And the vehicle will be allowed to burn up in the Earth's atmosphere, effectively getting rid of that trash and supplies. live view here of the HTV. As you can see, just you feed it away from its soon-to-be home on the Earth-facing port of the Harmony node. Crew will be moving it into what's called the ready-to-latch position shortly, and that will basically be moving it into place on that port, but not latching it just yet. And all there are 16 bolts that will be used to hold the vehicle in place on the Harmony node. Those will be driven in two stages. They'll first be engaged and not driven all the way to allow the space station's robotic arm to then basically go limp without letting go of the HTV-3. That will ensure that there aren't any unneeded loads that are being pushed onto the HTV-3 that might interrupt the latching or a good capture between the two vehicles. And once that's done, they'll be able to finish driving those 16 bolts, and that will complete the installation. At the controls of the space station's robotic arm at this time is Flight Engineer Aki Hoshide. And he is being assisted by Flight Engineer Joe Akaba, with also some help monitoring the camera views from Flight Engineer Sonny Williams. It's difficult to see because the operation is done so slowly and carefully, but the vehicle is in motion to that ready to latch position, which is basically getting it into place again on the port, the Earth-facing port of the Harmony node. This is Mission Control Houston. The team here on the ground reports that they are seeing 4 green lights for the ready to latch position indicators, which means that the...
We're a go for first stage capture.
Nice work, and we concur.
And Flight Engineer Sonny Williams there confirming that the HTV-3 or Kunatori 3 is in its ready to latch position, which means that they can begin now driving the bolts for the first stage capture. This again is just the initial part of the installation, and after it's been performed, the space station's robotic arm will basically go limp. It won't let go of its grip on the Kunatori just yet, but it will release any pressure it might be pushing on the vehicle so that it can ensure that there's no additional loads put on the bolts as they're driven. Crew on board the International Space Station should be just moments away from performing what's called the first stage capture of the HTV-3. That's the initial driving of the 16 bolts that are going to hold it in place on the International Space Station. That does not mark the final installation, though. That will come with the second stage capture after the space station robotic arm has been allowed to go limp and ensure that it doesn't push any unwanted loads onto the vehicle.
One for CBM. Just want to check for stable attitude control config and confirm that RS thrusters are disabled.
And that is confirmed. You will go for step 4.
Copy. Step 4 and work.
Step 4 of this procedure is performing the actual first stage capture, and that should take about less than 15 seconds. Teams here on the ground saying they see a good first stage capture of the HTV-3. Again, this is not the final word in installation. That'll come with a second stage capture, which should be...
Step 4 is complete. We got to go for SSRMS mode to limp.
Which should be following shortly. Space Station's robotic arm is now gone limp. Again, that makes sure that it doesn't put any pressure or weight or loads on the HTV-3 as the bolts are driven for their final stage capture.
CBM operator from the SSRMS operator. SSRMS mode to limp is complete. For the CBM operator, you have a go for second stage capture.
Houston copies, and we are putting 5.2.1 into work.
And Houston, we copy Houston.
And 5.2.1 is on board, so you are go to press.
Copy, we'll pick up in 5.2.2.
As the crew makes their final preparations before the final installation of the HTV-3, they happen to be flying about 250 miles above Tanegashima, just east of Tanegashima, which of course is where the HTV HTV-3 launched from a week ago on July 20th, beginning on its journey to the International Space Station. We should be just a few moments away from the second stage capture, driving the 16 bolts that's going to hold the HTV-3 to the International Space Station during its stay in space, and that again will confirm its installation at the space station.
Station on 1 for CBM, 5.2.2 is complete.
Copy, and 5.3.1 is in work.
Copy, standing by.
And 5.3.1 is on board. You are go to press in 5.3.2. And for future iterations, when you see capture and override, you are go to press.
Copy that.
For this second stage capture, the crew will go through an incremental process, slowly capturing to different degrees, starting with 130, which they just completed, and then moving down to 100, then 70 degrees, and 40, then moving down to 12 degrees before they finish the procedure. view here from the cameras on the exterior of the International Space Station. Good view of the HTV-3 now in place on the Earth-facing port of the Harmony node, but not yet fully installed. That is in the process of installation now, and should be coming soon.
And Houston Station on 1 for CBM. We show ourselves in step 6.
And we concur.
That call from the crew confirms that we now have that second stage capture that we've been waiting for, marking the official installation of the HTV-3 or HTV-3 to the International Space Station, delivering officially its 3.5-ton cargo to the station. That took place at 9:34 a.m. Central Time, while the space station was 253 miles above the North Pacific Ocean. Again, that official time was 9:34 a.m. Central Time for the installation of the HTV-3 to the Earth-facing port of the Harmony node. Once again, the HTV-3, or HTV-3, as it's called, is officially now docked to the International Space Station. The installation occurred at 9:34 a.m. Central Time, while the station and HTV-3 were 235 miles above the North Pacific Ocean. That marks the end of its week-long journey to the space station, which started on July 20th when it launched from Tanegashima Space Center in southern Japan, and now has delivered its 3.5 tons of cargo. Over the course of the day, the crew is going to be getting ready to open hatches between the station and the HTV-3, and that's actually scheduled to take place tomorrow around 6:20 a.m. Central Time. But since the crew is a good bit ahead of schedule already, it's not out of the question that they may also take their first float into the cargo vehicle a little early as well. crew will be unloading the pressurized cargo of the HTV-3 over the next several weeks, and it will be staying at the space station until September. And then on August 6th, they're also going to begin unloading the unpressurized or external cargo from the HTV-3, getting that moved to the Kibo Laboratories port. Once all the unloading is done, the crew will then be able to fill the vehicle back up with trash and used supplies that they can then get rid of when the vehicle leaves the space station and is allowed to burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. That 9:34 a.m. Central Time at docking, again 253 miles above the North Pacific Ocean, marks the end of our operations and coverage for the day. We'll be wrapping up here in the next few minutes, but you can tune back in tomorrow at 4 p.m. Central Time for coverage of the Progress 47 redocking. That ship undocked from the Piers docking compartment on July 22nd with the intention of redocking the following day, but a technical problem prevented it from performing that redocking, and so the teams here on the ground are ready to try again tomorrow. Again, coverage of that operation will start at 4 p.m. Central Time, with the actual docking, again to the Piers docking compartment, scheduled for 8 p.m. Central Time. Until then, that will wrap up our coverage of operations on the International Space Station for the day. This is Mission Control Houston.